Charles, we're almost there. The next lesson, we're going to do 3 short little sections. In the previous lesson, we looked at the appropriateness of our industrial development policies. So we are just quickly going to look at how appropriate our regional development policies are. We measure their success, okay? Then we're going to look at small business development and also BEE. Now, on the exam guideline, okay, you'll see they don't make mention of the success of our regional policies. It is incorporated if you carry on there. We are skipping this, okay? We're doing this last, right? You'll see evaluate South Africa's regional development policies in terms of the above benchmarks. So we're going to incorporate what we're doing now with the essay question that we're going to do in the last lesson. But what we're also going to do in this lesson, we're going to look at small business development, a brief explanation and an evaluation, and then the appropriateness of BEE, okay? Also a brief explanation and evaluation. All right, so in broad terms, in general terms, okay, if we just look at our regional development policies, okay, now when we look at our regional development policies, remember regional development policies is basically any policies that is aimed at creating a more equal distribution of economic activities across the different regions of the country, all right? So although the regional policies, what they want is that it should address long-term problems of structural unemployment, okay, and regional differences in growth and development. So that is the aim, okay? What we are trying to do is we are trying to create sustainable jobs to address structural unemployment is that serious kind of unemployment where the economy just cannot create enough jobs for all the people that lives there, all right? So we want regional development. One of the aims of regional development policy was to create more equality in terms of distribution of economic activities. We want to create industrial development, and through industrial development, we want to create jobs. All right. So that's the aims basically of regional development policies. But the constraints that we are experiencing, so what is preventing our regional development policies from being as successful as what they should be? Okay, so first of all, one of the things we looked at under regional development, the South African endeavors, was the IDZs, industrial development zones. Development within these zones have been very, very slow. There's literally, of all the zones that was identified, remember we identified 4 IDZs, only 2 of them have been fully established and is actually operating as they should. The other 2, development is just too slow. There's no interest from industry side to establish themselves within these IDZs. Okay, then after years, I mean, if you think back, we said that the regional development policy was introduced in 1995. So after all of these years, regional development is still uneven. All right, there's still a huge difference in terms of economic activities being concentrated in the 4 metropolitan areas, and it hasn't really spilled over into the developing areas. It still tends to be concentrated or centralized. All right. Then the IDZs did not attract as much local and international investments as expected. Remember, the whole purpose with these IDZs was that the government wanted to create these estates so that local entrepreneurs and foreign entrepreneurs would be willing to establish their businesses within these IDZs. And the hope was that because of the incentives that they were offered, a lot of people would be willing to go and settle inside of these IDZs. But that which they thought was going to happen, they wanted a huge amount of investments. It wasn't really as good as what they thought. Okay? It didn't attract as much investment as what they hoped. Okay? Currently in our country, also workers still tend to move to the areas where there is employment. So we have not been hugely successful in terms of creating opportunities, job opportunities and industrial development in our underdeveloped areas. What we find is urbanization is continuing. Workers are still moving away from those underdeveloped areas because they cannot find employment. They move into the cities hoping to find employment. All right. So we haven't met that objective of creating jobs there for the people where they are. People still kind of have to move to where they can find opportunities. And then in terms of the SEZs, the one that we do have, there's shortcomings in terms of the capacity restraints. Okay? Our harbors are just not big enough. Skill shortages, the costs involved, transport cost of electricity, the backlogs at the harbors. They can't find skilled workers. Obviously, the SEZs cannot function properly with these constraints. All right. So these are the factors that are inhibiting the success of our regional development policies. Okay. Then we're also going to look at small business development just very, very quickly. The Small Business Development Program is specific government programs that is there to assist smaller businesses, your small and medium businesses, to become more competitive and sustainable. All right, so we want to improve the chances of survival of small and medium businesses by making them more competitive so that people would support them. All right. In terms of small business development, we were relatively successful, okay, because the promotion of entrepreneurship, especially amongst the women and the youth, have been achieved. Okay, so we're finding that there's an increased amount of women that are functioning as entrepreneurs, that are opening their own businesses, as well as young people. All right. I think in many cases it is out of necessity for young people. They are not able to find a job, so they need to create an opportunity for themselves, but at least they do have that opportunity. Then there's been improved access to finance and capital, information and advice. Remember, I said that a huge constraint basically to people wanting to open businesses is financing. Yeah, sometimes they would be willing, they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to start their own business, but they don't necessarily have access to financing. All right. And that has been addressed, okay, specifically for smaller businesses. We spoke about Kula Enterprise Finance, business referral, the information network. There's a lot of institutions where these entrepreneurs can go, that they can approach for financing, okay, for financial support. Others are just there for information. All right, sometimes they don't necessarily need financial support, but they need somebody to help them to make their business plan so that they can approach the bank for financing. Yeah, the bank's not going to give you financing unless they like your business plan, but not everybody knows how to make a business plan. So there are some places that doesn't necessarily offer loans or financing, but they provide a huge amount of advice and information, and they guide the entrepreneurs through the process of how to start a business, how to run their business, what are the labor issues that you have to look out for, the tax implications, etc., etc. All right, because people don't always have this information. And then lastly, the appropriateness of BEE in our economy. Okay, now obviously in our country we call it BEE, Black Economic Empowerment, broad-based Black Economic Empowerment, triple BEE. But the concept of the triple BEE is not something that we in South Africa thought up. All right. In many other countries, indigenous people have been marginalized in the past and are given certain advantages now, because of their marginalization in the past. So both the United Nations and the World Bank emphasize the importance to empower our indigenous people, especially in developed and in developing countries, but specifically in developing countries. All right. So international organizations approve of the system of triple BEE because it is important that we create empowerment where previously there was marginalization. All right. So international laws also recognizes legislation as a method to empower indigenous people. Just remember, triple BEE, it is a law. It is a law that was passed by the government, and internationally, these types of laws, I'm trying to think of the word, okay, the redress. It's laws that creates redress. And that is seen internationally as an acceptable way to make sure that indigenous people are empowered. Okay, so much have been done in our country to align the triple BEE policy with our industrial policy, okay, but there are certain limitations. All right. First of all, managerial appointments did not always meet the required training and experience criteria needed to make a success of the position. So obviously, in terms of triple BEE, businesses have to appoint Black people, women, marginalized people into management positions, okay, to have meaningful participation. And the idea is that when people apply for a position and there are two people that are suitably qualified for this position, the position must be given to the marginalized person, the Black person or the woman or the disabled person or the whatever. All right. But sometimes it does happen that the Black person, let's say, when he applies for the position, he doesn't necessarily have the required training. He doesn't necessarily have the skills or the experience to be the good manager, but businesses by law are forced to appoint that person anyway. So it does sometimes happen because of this law that people are appointed into positions that they are not qualified for, that they don't have the necessary experience, they cannot make a success of their appointment because they're in too deep, right? That they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They are appointed purely because of the color of their skin and not because of their skills and their training and their whatever. And then obviously, if you do not have enough experience, if you're not trained to fill that position, obviously you're not going to be able to do your job well. All right, and then second problem is that foreign and local investors do not always show trust in the industry, mainly because of corruption and also certain views on nationalization. All right, obviously when certain people shout and scream nationalization, we need to nationalize the mines, we need to nationalize the bank, we need to nationalize the Reserve Bank. Obviously, that creates distrust. All right, if I was a foreign investor and I've got a huge amount of shares in a bank. Obviously, if those banks are nationalized, I am going to lose the money that I've invested in that bank. My ownership is going to be taken away if it is nationalized. So any kind of talk of nationalization undermines investor confidence. No local person is going to, like if they want to nationalize the land, for example, that's the contentious issue. If they nationalize land, I am not going to buy land because if it gets taken away from me, I've paid for it and now they're taking it away and I get nothing. I'm not going to do that. Okay, why would I invest my money? They're just going to take it away. So any talk of nationalization obviously is very, very negative. It's very bad for investor confidence. Local investors are not going to invest. Foreigners are going to invest even least. They are not interested in investing in this country because they might lose their ownership. They must lose their investment. They don't want that. Okay. Plus, with nationalization, it means that the government basically takes ownership of those resources, and we are very highly ranked on the ladder of corruption. Our government is extremely corrupt. There's a huge amount of corrupt officials there. Money gets misallocated. And now we want to nationalize the Reserve Bank, for example. With the amount of corruption in government, that can only be a problem. All right. So that is very, very negative for investments. Okay, that's the end of this lesson.